fresh, so don't play with us. We came to party, no taming us. Let the beat warm up. Ain't no rush.
Alright, so when I'm making a track, I like to start off with a 16 or an 8-bar loop, and I like to get a groove and a vibe going. If I can achieve this within an hour or 2 hours, then I know I've got something to work with and I can expand upon that, and fleshing out the track is just a matter of a formula and just comes with experience. So what I'll do, I'll start a new project. I will just highlight an 8-bar section up here, and I'll just start off with some drums most of the time. Sometimes I might start with a bass line that I've come up with, whether I've created a new bass sound and I'm playing a melody, or sometimes there might be a sample or there might be a synth that I like and I build the track around that. But most of the time, I'm gonna start off with the drums and I'm gonna get a vibe going with that, and then we'll build from there. So with Dangerous, let's just solo all the drums that I have. Cool, so they're the drums that I have in my track, and already you can sort of feel a vibe from it. The shakers add a bit of groove because they've got a bit of swing to it. Now, I like to program my own drums most of the time. Early on in my career, I started off using a lot of loops, and I have no issue with people, who are beginning and they just want to get a track going and get something started and they use drum loops. So there's nothing wrong with that. But as you get more experienced and you want to develop your own unique sound, I find that creating your own drum loop is just as important as coming up with your own unique sounds or unique bass lines. So I like to program my drums myself. Now, how I do this is I use Native Instruments Maschine, which I think is a really cool drum sampler. So if you're not familiar with how Native Instruments Maschine works, I've got a whole lot of groups up here, and within those groups you can create different scenes or patterns. So let's just go somewhere fresh. So with group 1 here, I'll turn everything on. This will be all the drum sounds I used. So the Native Instruments Maschine has a lot of good expansion packs, and there's a lot of ones that are focused specifically on tech house. So I've purchased a fair few of them, and it's really easy to browse. So when I'm just looking for new sounds, I've got the packs there and I can browse by pack. So I know which ones were the tech house orientated and focused ones. So I'll go through there. It's categorized and organized really well. So if I want drums, I click drums, clap, hi-hat close, hi-hat open, snares, and I can search for them that way. So I would have started my 8-bar loop and, just chuck down the basics, a clap on every second one, hat, start adding in the hi-hat, and then also the shaker. Now, what really gives drums groove and will make it sound really professional is the swing setting. And now most people either don't know about it or they forget to do it. So swing settings on your drums is what's going to make it not feel robotic and make it feel like a human's actually playing it. Because at the end of the day, we're making music within a computer, but we don't want it to sound like a computer made it. We want it to feel organic and have that human touch to it. So we can create that in our drums by applying swing and adding a bit of groove to it. So you'll notice if I turned off all the groove settings or the swing settings on these drums, it would feel very rigid and as I said, feel very robotic. So I've applied some swing settings even on the clap so that the clap's not hitting directly on the kick. It's a millisecond afterwards, but it adds that swing to it. On the hats there, you can see a tiny amount as well. And then on the hi-hat, obviously we're going to have some swing. Same with the shaker, because that's where that groove comes from. So once I've come up with this little drum pattern that I think is pretty cool and has a bit of vibe to it, I will export these sounds into my DAW. So while I'm just playing around, I'll keep it in Maschine. I'll drum out the patterns on the Maschine pad, which is really good to use. That's also why I like using it. It's really fun to, just play out like you're actually playing a drum kit while you're trying to come up with something. So I'll export those sounds into my DAW. As you can see, I've got them down here, and we'll just start looping it. Now also, something that I didn't do in Maschine is I will have my kick drum. Now, when I'm looking for a kick drum, I want something with a lot of punch to it, to be honest with you, because playing in the clubs, the tracks that I personally like the most and I find that get really good responses on the dance floor are ones with awesome kick drums. Like, the kick drum is so important and significant in your track and in your mix that even just looking for the right sound is quite important and might take you a lot of time to look for one. So in this track, I have 2 samples that make up the kick. So we've got the low part, and that had that nice low thump that I wanted. Now, by itself, it doesn't have that click part of the kick that I want as well. So I found this sample, and I just EQ'd out everything below 500 hertz. Now, on top of the first one, that's sounding like a nice kick drum to me, and that's what I was after. So we'll add in my drum loop now. And I added a bit of percussion. So as you can see in my Maschine drum sampler, so like group 1, I keep for the basics like clap, hat, hi-hat. And then maybe on the second groups, I'll have things like, cowbell, a random perk here and there, or some snares, something like that. So I've put a cowbell in there as well. And this is the drum loop that I have going. Now, once I have a groove that I'm liking and I'm happy with, now I will probably move on to the bass line next and come up with a vibe for that. So as most of you would know, if you know my Needs No Sleep tracks, I love that dirty driving bass line, but I also like to try and make unique and different tracks. So for this one, I wanted to make something really bouncy. I wanted, a Tom style bass line, which is what I ended up with. So the Tom style is here. And I came up with that bass line. Now, I played that one into Maschine directly, which you will be able to hear here. Let me just mute that. And the drum pad comes in really handy because I can mute and solo sounds just by using my hands. So instead of having to click around inside the plugin, I can just mute that whole group there and unmute group 2. Turn off that. Boom, boom. So that was the bass line that I wanted. Now, again, I found that tom in one of the Maschine expansion packs, so it was easy to find. I cancel that. Drums, tom, and then I would have just scrolled through there and found a tom that I wanted. And then I came up with this melody. Now, one thing that's important to remember as well is just because it's a drum sample, that tom still has a tonal part to the sound which has a musical pitch. So it's important to work out what note that tom is playing so that we can write the rest of our track in the same key and it sounds harmonious. So to find out the pitch of this tom, I used a plugin called G-Tune, which is a free plugin, and you will play it and it tells us it's hitting E. Now, there's also another way that you can find out the pitch of something yourself is you can use an equalizer and you can find the fundamental note there. So if I check that, it's at 82 hertz. And now if you go on Google and do frequency to note converter and you type in 82 hertz, it's also going to tell you that that's hitting E. So now I have 2 confirmations that it's hitting E, and that's the key that I'm going to write my track in. Now, what also gives groove to the bass line, as I was talking about before, is swing. So you can see I've got quite a decent amount of swing on this bass line, and that's what makes it feel bouncy and helps add to the groove. So I export that out, and I'll add that into the rest of my drum loop. I hope you enjoyed that little clip from my project walkthrough video. The full hour-long content is available on my website, needsnosleep.com. If you have any questions, always reach out to me and I'll do my best to get back to you. Until then, I'll see you on the next video.
Dangerous, so don't play with us. We came to party, no taming us. Let the beat warm up. Ain't no rush.